Welcome everyone. Hello, good afternoon. We are excited to be here with you today. Before I start, let me tell you a little bit about the background as to who CSI is and my role within it. So CSI is a national research and education center, and we operate out of 3 partner universities, UWA, UNSW, and Swinburne. And we produce research that catalyzes social change, and we are the leading provider of undergraduate courses and postgraduate programs in social impact. But more than that, we aim to build capacity in the social purpose sector and bring people together to create social change. Today, we come to you from Perth, and I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Noongar people, and pay respect to their past and present elders. I am a research assistant professor at CSI UWA with a background in geography and planning, and I am joined by my colleague Lisette Callavald, a social researcher and evaluation specialist. For the past 2 years, we have been evaluating 2 DSS Try, Test and Learn programs, exploring innovative approaches to reducing welfare dependence. Today, we will be drawing upon the approaches from the Mentoring to Work project that focuses on youth unemployment. So joining the panel is Paul Abbott, the Principal Project Officer of the Mentoring to Work project, and he brings with him extensive experience in the employment sector and practical insights on the project. So in this webinar, we will present the context of youth unemployment in Australia and briefly discuss the impact of COVID-19 before turning to the Mentoring to Work program. And in our discussion, we will focus on the importance of relational support for unemployed young people in their journey to work. There is a fact sheet on COVID-19 that I believe has just gone up today, and it accompanies this webinar, and we invite you to look at it on our website. Youth unemployment is a major challenge for policymakers in Australia, as every year young people join the ranks of those looking for work and discover the challenges of not only getting, but keeping work. And the definition of unemployment by the ABS is a person who is unemployed during a specific reference period is one who is not employed for 1 hour or more and is actively seeking work and is currently available to work. And usually the term refers to unemployed young people, the term youth unemployment, unemployed young people between the ages of 15 and 24 years. Now, prior to the COVID pandemic, young people were already disproportionately and adversely affected in the labor market compared to other age cohorts. And in December 2019, the figures of youth unemployment were 11.5%, and that's more than double the general population of 5.1. And this, of course, masks a huge amount of regional variations. The overall youth unemployment rate is very different in remote, rural, and even outer suburban locations. And some places, such as Queensland Outback region, experiences rates of over 25% of youth unemployment. In Perth, where the Mentoring to Work project is located, there are pockets of very high youth unemployment, for example, in the northwest Perth area, and there they experience rates of about 16.7%, which is considerably above the national average. So the youth labor market is characterized by higher levels of employment in consumer-facing roles, such as in retail and hospitality, and considerably higher rates of part-time employment and casual work than the general population. And this makes them specifically and susceptible to losing their work, their jobs, and having their hours reduced during economic downturns. Underemployment also is significant, and those are people who are working fewer hours than they would want to. And this disproportionately affects young people who work in these sectors, with the highest rates of workforce casualization, such as in the service industry. So young people with little or no work experience are greatly disadvantaged entering the job market during a crisis, such as the GFC or the COVID pandemic. And those making the transitions from education to work during such a time find it particularly difficult to get entry-level jobs due to the increased competition and declining availability of jobs. And the important thing here is that research has shown that this can have profound, long-lasting impacts at a population level for that age group. Now, we know that unemployment has significant impacts on young people. They are at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems. Research by Roy Morgan in 2015 found that as the youth unemployment rate rises, mental health issues in young people, such as anxiety, depression, and panic attacks, not surprisingly, also rose, with a quarter of the young job seekers being affected by depression. And it is also well known that unemployment in the early stages of a person's career can have long-term impacts on their economic well-being. Unemployment at the start of their career can lead young people to have lower skills, lower confidence and expectations, and aspirations for employment. But interestingly, longitudinal studies point to the scarring effect of being unemployed when young. And tragically, the impact of this in later life in terms of subsequent lower pay, higher unemployment, reduced life chances, and later life mental health problems as well. So when young people become long-term unemployed, they are at risk of falling into entrenched disadvantage and welfare dependence. Now, youth unemployment does not just affect the individual, but it has profound societal impacts as well, as illustrated in this quote by Catherine Livingstone, reflecting on youth unemployment in Australia. Employment facilitates social connections with others and helps to build identity and develop skills for active citizenship. So high rates of long-term unemployment can make young people feel left out, and in time it can lead to social exclusion and marginalization, further exacerbating inequalities in society. I will now turn to Lisette, who will talk about some of the effects of COVID-19 on youth unemployment.
Thanks, Mariana. So, of course, COVID-19 has exacerbated the issue of youth unemployment. This is a huge story in and of itself, and unfortunately today in the webinar we won't have time to go into too much depth, but the good news is that today our fact sheet on the COVID-19 and youth unemployment has been published, so that will have all the details there of like the statistics and the labour market effects. But I'll just take this chance to note a few things that Mariana has already indicated. But one is, you can see this graph of the April labour force statistics, and they do indicate a sudden rise in youth unemployment, which was expected. However, there are measurement issues about how that's defined and measured, which we'll go into detail in our fact sheet. But just to know that it does, that blue line that you see showing a slight rise in unemployment, or a significant rise, it does mask actually a much larger issue that isn't captured by that line. So it's the orange line that does a better job of indicating, because the orange line is about the employment rate. So as you can see, the youth unemployment rate has really dropped since April. And so this is just a taster with more detail in the fact sheet. But this is just the immediate impacts of the past few months. We're expecting this to be a big issue moving forward. As Mariana has touched on, a lot of research into the, the global financial crisis, the recessions of the last century, the Great Depression, they all show that it's that cohort of people who are moving into the labour market for the first time that are really deeply impacted by an economic shock, and the impacts might last for their life. So if this is like a call to action, you know, you're at the right seminar at the right time. We've got to put our heads together and let's really focus on this issue for the young people. And now I'll hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Lizette. Hi all, so Paul's my name. I'm head up the Mentoring to Work program, and I'm employed by Council on the Ageing here in Western Australia. So just before I go into too much detail about the structure of our program, I just want to set down a little bit of context in terms of the employment services sector. So it was actually from job active providers that we recruited unemployed and underemployed young adults into our program. And job active has actually been in place since 2015 and will continue until July of 2022. So it's set up so that requirements of and support for job seekers increases the longer that they're on benefits. So generally, and this is very general, the first 6 months is very much self-driven, with a number of jobs needing to be applied for each month, as well as a monthly face-to-face appointment with the consultant, the job seekers provider. So beyond that first phase, activity increases with things like assisted job search, increase in one-on-one appointments with a consultant where there are any changes to note, updating resume, being referred to jobs, perhaps even reverse marketed, but also referred to employment-related training programs. What also kicks in is mandatory programs like Work for the Dole. So for more longer-term unemployed job seekers, they may undergo counselling to even help overcome vocational barriers they might be experiencing. So the federal government has been consulting with job seekers, job active providers, employers and industry groups in terms of getting their feedback on the current job active model, but also using this feedback and information to devise a new employment services model for post-July 2022. So early indications of what the new model could look like. Looks like it's heavily online with a digital self-service and reporting platform to be used initially. And then this platform would be interlaced with more face-to-face support from there on. So that illustration that you see on your screen there, the I Want to Work report, is a document that basically sums up this consultation and feedback gathering phase from the federal government. And just in terms of the current job active context, it's a really useful document to refer to. So I'll actually make this available to you after the webinar. So another initiative which Mariana mentioned before that the government has been running in regard to its overall outlook on welfare dependency is the Try, Test and Learn Fund, funded by the Department of Social Services. Now, the Try, Test and Learn Fund is basically funding which is used to develop and trial pilot programs which are focused on different cohorts reliant on welfare across the country. So for Mentoring to Work, under this initiative, our focus was young adults aged 18 to 25 who are at risk of long-term unemployment and situated across the Perth North region, which, as Mariana said before, has one of the highest youth unemployment rates in all the country. So thank you. I've just flicked over to a model of our program. But just before I go into that, I'll just start off with a little bit more broader information. So Mentoring to Work was conceived as being a person-centred and tailored program of support. Its purpose was never to duplicate or replicate job active, but more to bolt onto it. And you'll see why as I talk a little bit more to its structure. So Mentoring to Work ran over 3 phases. We rolled out a trial stage to basically test the structure that we had there and adopt any improvements, which were then implemented for us to continue rolling out across the broader Perth North region. So as you can see, this model is actually in 2 colours. The young adult is the one I'll focus on to begin with. So the first step was for us to promote the program to young adults, and I must acknowledge all job active, transitional work and employability skills training providers who let us come onto their site and present mentoring to work to their young adults, as well as refer to us as well, which is fantastic. In the end, we had some 170 young adults engaged or start in the program on a voluntary basis, which was just massive. So what we wanted to do, the first step we wanted to do once we had a young adult interest in the program, is really make sure they understood that because mentoring to work is person-centred in its design, they would really only get from it what they put into it. So upon starting with us, a mentoring to work team member would take the young adult through a toolkit of activities. So I'm just referring now to where it says young adult toolkit on the model there. To really get the young adult focused on self-reflection and assessment, establishing priorities, as well as understanding their employability skills and strengths, as well as ones to develop. So then we'd take an outward focus for the young adult to start to do some research and gathering of information on potential employment and career pathways. At this point, the mentoring to work team member would have been able to really get to know the young adult's priorities and direction, engage their level of commitment and engagement at that point, because that was really important in terms of starting to think of preparing the young adult to be matched with a mentor. So it's also really important to note at this stage that sometimes for some young adults, the activities which we took them through in the toolkit was actually enough for them in terms of what they needed to take their next step. So if they came into employment or meaningful education and no longer felt they needed to be in the program, that was fine as well. So just moving to the mentor part of the model in the blue. I must acknowledge United Way over here in WA, who did an absolutely fantastic job in recruiting all of our mentors. They came from such a broad range of industries across public and private sectors. And what was consistent across all mentors was their key reason for joining, which is really to pay forward their skills, knowledge and experience to younger adults coming through. So as you can see in the model there, mentors would undergo a screening interview as part of the recruitment process. That would then be followed by reference checks and undergoing a volunteering work police clearance. So once all this was completed, the mentoring to work team would run them through an induction workshop, which came to be really very important for us because it allowed us to get to know the mentors and start thinking of some potential matches between them and the young adults that we were working through the toolkit part of the program. So matches were actually made for a variety of factors, but probably the most consistent was actually personality compatibility. We didn't have a set formula or points of criteria. It was very much, each pairing was very much considered on a one-to-one basis. So once matched, mentors and young adults would meet somewhere mutually convenient, so a library or a cafe, which is where we would also, before that, meet the young adults to go through the toolkit of activities. And us in the mentoring to work team would actually fall back to a more support role. The frequency of the mentor and mentee meetings was really their call. For us, as long as they were consistent and ongoing, that was really all that mattered. Mentors would take notes and send it through to us, and we would record and report on them. And generally, the mentoring phase would last for 6 months. So thank you. So the toolkit phase was structured to show, not tell. Because the activities are person-centred in design, they could actually be applied to young adults who have or haven't ever worked, as well as ones who do or don't know what their employment or career direction is. So escalating from self-reflection to looking out to gathering information was all about having them think about things with more of a big picture perspective. So doing this was great because it helped put things in the past or present in context, but it really also set them up to establish what their employment goals were and how to plan towards achieving them. So applying goals and plans short, mid and long term meant that they were all the more realistic and manageable to achieve, therefore really generating a sense of confidence and validation. So with the mentor coming in at this point, The idea was that they would continue to drive this momentum that's been built up in the young adult to give them guidance in achieving what they've planned so far. So young adults in mentoring to work really benefited greatly from having a mentor outside of their own circle. Just moving on to the second point there in black, outside of their own circle, because they could really start afresh with someone with a fresh set of eyes and impartiality. And for some of our mentor and young adult pairings, the largest factor for bringing them together was industry alignment. That is, if a mentor worked in an industry that the young adult was aspiring to, the guidance that they could get that was free of judgment or agenda from their mentor would stand them in good stead going forward. So young adults have really grown hugely in confidence from being mentored because they're broadening their own network and they understand that they've been invested in by someone outside of their circle unconditionally. Being listened to without judgment and agenda was a really powerful thing for our young adults. What stemmed from this was really big boosts in self-confidence, validation and self-belief, which all resulted in greater accountability and responsibility and ownership of their own job search. So just touching on the last point at the bottom, transformation from unemployed to employed happens for a young adult, or anyone for that matter, through self-appreciation and understanding. It comes through broad perspective and a sense of purpose. And it happens with accessing and using information to its fullest. And in our program, like I said at the start, the transformation happened because the young adults were shown, not told. But all that said, we did have a fair portion of young adults who felt either compelled to do our program and therefore didn't fully engage, and others that did give it a real go, but due to other circumstances, issues or priorities, it just wasn't for them, and that was fine. We've always run to a do no harm ethos. So because we didn't want anyone to ever feel forced to do it. When they did, if they did come into the program kind of feeling a little bit compelled to do it and obliged to do it, they wouldn't stand to get the full benefit of the program, and from a mentor's point of view, their time and their effort would likely have gone to waste. Thanks, Lizette. I'll hand over to you.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the evaluation and the findings. The evaluation is a 2-year evaluation, quite a gritty one using a quasi-experimental design and quantitative results. But those findings are not yet ready. But along the way, we have collected quite a lot of qualitative results, which we will draw on today. But first, we'll begin. We just love a bit of theory. So we're going to start here, and we're actually going to borrow some theory from the mental health sector, where I also work. So I saw some parallels perhaps, but so you may know that historically mental health was framed as something that was carried by an individual. It was an issue or a problem that an individual held. But now new attention is being paid towards new recovery models, and a lot of these models are about a person's relationship with others, and that they will recover in connection with either other close people or with groups, or with broader participation like active citizenship and contribution and all these other lovely concepts. So we loved this and thought maybe there are some parallels here, like maybe, you know, being jobless, is that an individual problem, or is that something that you could address more broadly through relationship? And if, I guess, every one of us thinks back at their own career, I guess we've all really, we haven't done it alone, and we've been doing that within a network of meaningful relationships and support. Next slide. So how does this work? We've been exploring this, and we started with a theory of action where we tried to work out what mentoring was. And I can see a few people in the audience have mentoring backgrounds or work in mentoring programs, and you know it's a bit amorphous, it's not well defined. So we tried to unpack what a mentor could possibly do to help a young adult facing unemployment. And We thought they could help with skills and job-seeking behaviours, clarify their vision, use their own networks. We actually had originally thought the mentor would come with networks to help, and that was the case in a few times, but actually it was often that the young adult was sitting already in a network, but they had never really thought of themselves as having that network of support. So it was just about showing them that, and that was really powerful. That's what the young adults told us. And the considering education and training that leads to a better job. So that was our conceptualization of it to begin with. However, we soon found that that was too narrow. When we did 2 focus groups of mentors recently, we basically asked them, what is mentoring? We don't know. We've only read about it, but we actually didn't know what was happening inside these relationships. This page. But the idea of presenting this is to illustrate just how rich these relationships were, how many kinds of pathways and transformation were explored, that each young adult had different needs, and that if they were in a safe, trusting relationship, that could be a place that was agile enough to explore different needs, whether it was just giving someone the idea that they could do something else, because some of the young people did come from quite limiting environments. There were some young carers who hadn't had the chance to even talk to an older person or an adult about what they might do with their life. Some of the inputs were very practical about how to find a job. A mentor was someone who they could be accountable for, even if it's just in their imagination, like someone's going to ask me about this next week, I better do it. And there was this whole piece of work around just getting your life together, like not playing video games all night, waking up at the same time, having breakfast, getting exercise. So that is something that, say, in the system we don't often think about, but it is part of a job-ready sort of story. So yeah, we were quite surprised talking with the mentors at how, nuanced and sophisticated, I guess, this support could be. And it didn't need to be too intensive or long-term either. Sometimes the inputs they were simple and short, but just the fact that a relationship could address the things that needed to be addressed in a natural way was the power here. Okay, thanks. Next slide. And just one last point, that don't think that it was all too soft, they were just being friends kind of thing, because we also collected evidence around what people talked about during these mentoring meetings. And so 91% of the meetings that were recorded did focus on employability, like a strong focus. It was a very targeted, a goal that both the mentor and the mentee were working towards, and you can see that that was their priority. But it's just that during these conversations, they also were talking about study, life skills, goals, personal barriers, and to a lesser extent, networking. So you can see that all these kind of approaches to helping someone find a job were sitting alongside each other and supporting each other. Thanks. I'll hand over to Ariana.
So as Lisette said, we don't have yet the quantitative findings, but for the past year and a half, we've been tracking and speaking to the participants and having some really rich findings. So speaking with them, many of them have been really quite, profoundly impacted by the program. And here we've got a selection of some of their quotes. So The program has given the participants, one of the main things, it's given them greater confidence in themselves and clarity on their options and their goals. And prior to joining the program and being part of this, they felt very much excluded by the current employment support system, and they felt they didn't deserve a job and were overwhelmed by the process of looking. And one of the quotes there is actually very poignant. Before mentoring to work, I felt I wasn't worthy of a proper job, and I didn't deserve one. I do deserve a job, and now I know how to get one and how to go out and take it. So we heard these sort of really quite profound feelings of sort of claiming back a bit of control, a bit of power, and being able to at least plan their goals, plan their future, and create some steps to be able to achieve those. And the program was very transformational for some of them. They were able to look at more targeted jobs that were more suitable for their qualifications, and as I said, to ultimately reach their goals. And it helped to plan and expand the horizons. So in their words, this is just a snapshot of some of the very transformative impact that they experienced in this program. And reflecting on the young adults' feedback and experience, and this is emerging from conversations with them where they sort of compared this program, the Mentoring to Work program, with the alternative to the job active system, and how this has helped them. And one of the ways is it's driven by their goals. It's person-centered, it's focused on their need, as opposed to the way they saw it as being more compliance and requirement focused. And this program also was more aspirational. It asked them the question, who are you? What do you like? What do you want to be in life? Where do you want to go? As opposed to what they said in the job active system, that very often it's, you've got to apply for 20 jobs, get a job, any advertised job. And so they really valued the ability to reflect on themselves and to reflect on their values and aspirations. And this program, as Paul has outlined, is very much the relational support. It's about spending time one-on-one, building over several weeks and months to address multiple barriers. And as Lisette said, some of them appeared very, very small. It's knowing how to act, how to respond, but actually they were cumulatively barriers to them reaching employment. And the way in the job active system, in our research, when we did the control groups, we worked within the job active offices, and there are some amazing people working there, but for whatever reasons, the time limitations and the briefs, they weren't able to offer the support that some of these young people needed. And finally, it was very empowering. It was a program that was free of judgment and an agenda, and they had the ability to address varying issues. And what they said is that they felt very isolated and sometimes very angry within the job active system, that they felt that they were a number, that they didn't count. And so, to conclude, some of these key learnings. What we have found is that getting employment is not the only need. And sometimes there are several secondary barriers to employment that need to be addressed. And sometimes they can be pretty sizable and you have to refer to other organizations, but sometimes they're quite small and easy to address. The person-centered and relational support it can be, and we've seen, is a very effective way of addressing some of these multiple barriers. And young adults responded really well to the relationship with mentors and with the project staff in ways that were quite life-changing for some of them. So mentoring can also be described as a transfer of social capital, and it can contribute to broader social equity outcomes. But we also have to understand this was a two-way relationship. So the young adults, the young unemployed youth gained a lot, but so did the mentors. So this is a project that can cross-fertilize in that way. So thank you all for listening. What we'd like to do now is to open up the discussion and to, let's, as Lisette said, this is a call to action, everyone. Let's see whether some ideas can emerge to try to address this.
Thank you so much, you guys. I was going to say, you can tell I'm in the east and you're in the west because it's gone very dark as I've been sitting here. A couple of questions have come through, so thank you guys, and please by all means jump into the chat function now and ask any questions that you have for the panel. Kelly asks, what are the exact outcomes you're measuring and how are you going about doing this?
Lisette, do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you want me to bring up a slide? Yeah. No.
Yeah, maybe the model.
Yeah.
There we go. So the defined outcomes were around, for young adults, you can see the yellow ones. The idea was that their employment networks would be expanded through mentoring, that they may engage in education training to lead to employment, and that they're more job ready with skills and motivation, and that they're employed and they have improved well-being, and that includes health and mental health outcomes. So as I mentioned, we had the quasi-experimental design. So we did have measures at their initial induction around some of these domains around their health and mental health and self-efficacy. We looked at their support systems they had in place. So we took all those measures and we're taking them again now 1 year on.
And a follow-up to that, Lisette, is that Kelly just asked, so how do you measure job readiness?
We have, I can't remember, we have a really long survey basically that takes 40 minutes to do with, but it's around the skills, their activity. Mariana, can you,
Yeah.
it's quite that like hard skills around what they can do, like can you write a resume? Perhaps Mariana.
Yeah, it was around resume, interview skills. So it was around defined activities about being able to look for work, write a cover letter. Do you have a referee? How confident are you in interviews? Those were the sorts of activities that were looked at.
Great stuff, thank you. So somebody messaged me and said, thank you so much for the presentation. This all sounds so good. How do we roll this out in regional and rural areas?
Paul.
We're very fortunate because this program's funded by the Try, Test and Learn fund. So really with participants not paying to be a part of the program, that funding was absolutely crucial. And because it's a voluntary program, Job Actives didn't need to pay for it as an activity either. So how do we roll out conceptually? Well, I would definitely say focusing on an area. So for us, because we had Perth North, it was pretty straightforward to line up with the job active providers, EST providers, TTWs, and really get them on board to see what they're doing in terms of engaging their younger job seekers, and if their own statistics are as mirror the broader unemployment stats for that, and see if there's a likeness there. In terms of rolling out our program with mentors, it was quite tricky to begin with, because it was a new program. It was basically came out of the ground, so to speak. So it did take us a while to line up not just young adults to volunteer in the program, but also mentors. So I would say getting on to devising a network of mentors as soon as you could would be very preferable.
And just to add to that, we've been thinking a program like this, where would it naturally sit? And it could sit within a variety of places. One, it could even be part of a school program where the final years, it's incorporated in there. You have some form of mentoring. This does take place, you know, around the world. I do know that. So it depends on your local context and the structures that you have available, perhaps within a school network or a vocational college, something like that. It could reside in there.
If I can just jump back in, we formed very early on an ecosystem of partnering organisations, not just job active providers, but community service providers as well, employers, a whole raft of like-minded organisations, stakeholders that could have a part, and did for most play a part in our program. So that's really important, as well as really getting together, thinking in terms of an ecosystem to how's your program under.
Awesome. Thanks. I don't know if you've seen these questions coming through on the chat, but Liz has said, how can we remove the stigma from some of the language used in job seeking process? The first to go should be the label "work for the dole." It's discriminatory and offensive. Could not agree more with you, Liz. Did you have any thoughts on that?
So obviously the new model is still being devised, but I think that it will move away from terms like that. I mean, it's been around for so long; it's kind of just stuck. Work for the dole is mandatory, voluntary work, basically. So there are other definitely ways of labelling that, but I agree. The stigma that comes with job seeker and even job active, it's not just a community thing, but a more broader community. It impacts on employers. Employers really don't want to. There's risk that they get caught up in the being affected by the stigma associated with words like "work for the dole" and things. So I agree, it has to go, and hopefully in a new model that will actually be structured to incorporate new wording and glossary of new definitions. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, I would say that I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and lack of understanding about the realities of young people. And so the perception is, oh, they're lazy, they don't want to go out and get work, all of those things. And I think that stems deeply from not realizing how difficult and how impossible it can seem to the young people. So my call would be greater awareness, certainly greater discussion. More discussion is needed about that. And hopefully from that there will be less inflammatory and offensive language.
Yeah, agreed. Safa from Batir says, thank you for sharing. Can you please speak a bit more about the measures used to assess improvement in mental health and confidence?
We used mostly validated scales where we could. So that included the WHO Quality of Life Scale, the short version, the health scale, I can't remember where that was from, but that health and disability, that covered so many different health issues, including mental health. And the other ones that sort of related to mental health were the social support scale and self-efficacy and confidence. So there are a few scales that sort of fed into more of a well-being perspective. Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Mariana?
No, those were the ones that were in the survey. A very comprehensive, long survey.
Louisa asks, what role could, sorry, my English, Northern English is coming out there, does volunteering play for young adults?
What role does volunteering play for young adults?
Look, yeah, genuine volunteering can make a massive difference. And yeah, take our program, for example. Like I said, the young adults that volunteered to come into our program and really engaged with it and committed themselves to it as much as possible are the ones that our feedback, the data has shown got the most out of it. So in that regard, it shows that it's got to be something that they really align with personally, that they see obviously a benefit to them now and obviously how it's going to take them forward. So, and this is the trouble with mandatory volunteering initiatives like Work for the Dole. It's something that someone has to do, whereas real genuine volunteering, it comes from a sense of purpose and a belief in what they're volunteering for, whether it's for the cause or for their own genuine reasons.
I just had a message sent to me with a good question. How do you help mentors who are not exactly sure how to manage certain issues related to the confidence of the student or mentee, whether related to their cultural background, gender, or social status? And how about managing the expectations of graduates, as some may have too high expectations in their first years?
So yeah, the first part of that question, when we had the young adults and mentors first start to work together, it was made very clear that we are still around as a support to both the young adult and mentor. So we would speak one-on-one with the mentor to see how they're going, check in with them. Same with the young adult. And if there were any issues, then we would step in wherever and however it was needed. In terms of specific responding to low confidence and things, some general examples was really coming back to the plan which they had initially met on. So that was the career plan that the young adult had devised, and at the point of meeting the mentor was there to go on with. So in situations like that where maybe there was engagement, the young adult dropped off a little bit, reduction in confidence and things, it was just about bringing them back to their purpose and the focus in which they started out on. That seemed to work pretty well.
Paul, a lot of these questions are coming to you. I'm sorry, I'm not letting you take a breath.
No, you're right. And in terms of the graduate side of things, we did actually have a few uni graduates come into the program as well, and that was fantastic too, because they were examples of young adults that had a real idea of exactly what their career trajectory was. But they needed mentoring on a more specific tangent. So it might have been, if they were looking to get into media, obviously they need to be very good at networking. So that was the theme of their whole journey in the program. So I think to answer that second part of the question, if you can again keep a uni student or any young adult focused and centered on what their purpose is and what the big picture is, that makes all the difference.
Can I just jump in, and something that hasn't been drawn out yet is, can everyone see the model? The picture, is it up for everyone? Yep. So see the project staff at the top, the brown bar, that is the most, it's so important. So it's a little bit ambitious to send off a stranger with a mentor and a mentee that don't know each other to go and discuss issues. So how the program was designed was that the project staff, like Paul, really were the anchor. So they really got to know the young adults so well, and the mentor. And so that if there were any issues, like, people could come back to this safe ground, which was the project staff, and either, they could deal with matching problems or anything complex. So I just want to take, my hat off to Paul, who really, he and his team just played such an active role. They weren't administrators. They were there as an anchor and a safety net. It was really good.
Oh, that's awesome. A question here from Sally, again to you, Paul. Can you discuss the mentor induction program and continuing mentor development program, mentor development in more detail, please?
Yeah, sure. So the induction was really, like I said, it was really important for us to get to know the mentors. So we made it pretty interactive. There was a lot of sharing of information. It wasn't, death by PowerPoint. We really wanted to have that opportunity to get to know the mentors, and the mentors to get to know each other, because what we did throughout the program was have functions where mentors could come together and network and share any their experiences with their young adults and help each other out in that regard. So in the workshop itself, we had to be very careful not to drill down too specifically about the issues that they may or may not encounter with their young adults, because each and every one of our young adults was incredibly different. So for us, it was about preparing the mentors to be as agile and resourceful isn't quite the right word, but come into it with a real open mind, and at the very least you've at least got this pillar, this foundation in which to springboard from with your young adult, which was the toolkit. So there was quite a bit of apprehension when mentors came into the induction, thinking that they were going to be put with a stranger, someone that they hadn't met, and all of a sudden they were their mentor, and that wasn't the case. So really kept things as general but as informative as we could, without drilling down and getting too specific and lost in detail. But also just making them aware of what the purpose of the program was. It wasn't to teach, it wasn't to come in and coach and transform someone's life. It was to be a soundboard, to as a mentor, to be a guide but not an instructor. So really a lot of the foundations were about establishing credibility and trust by sharing information about yourself that you feel comfortable with, and really just building on from there.
So, as always, the way, 5 minutes before we're closing, I've got a few more questions for you. Just one here for probably you, Lisette, is did you use anything other than surveys to measure outcomes?
Yes, we did. We did focus groups with young adults and interviews with young adults and focus group with mentors. And even though I described those two surveys as like two different measures, we also had an exit survey, which was a completely different approach to a survey, like more of a reflection where they can sort of communicate what just happened, what was the immediate impact of the program and reflecting on it. So we've got quite a bit of data. We just haven't had time to analyze it yet.
In terms of other, if I can just quickly jump in terms of other results that we kept a track of, during the Mentoring to Work program, we had 50 job commencements for the young adults and 31 meaningful commencements in meaningful education. So really that testifies to our approach, which was again showing, not telling. The power of confidence came out in so many young adults that were seemed to be afraid of going up and meeting someone for the first time. Yet after some sessions in the toolkit or with a mentor, they got to a point where they could have copies of their resumes and walk around and actually cold canvas and market themselves directly to employers to tap into the hidden job market. So that again speaks really to our model of showing, not telling.
I try and squeeze in a couple more questions. Did the young adults get to work in group sessions, or did they have to work with their Toolkits project staff one-on-one?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We did try to get that up and running, but to be honest, the program, the way it was designed and presented was that it was a one-on-one tailored support program. So there were elements of the toolkit that could be done in a group setting, but to be honest, we just didn't get the interest there. The young adults were really just enjoying having getting more out of that one-on-one focus. So tried to, but no, it didn't happen.
I think this is going to have to be close to our last question, and that's how many full-time project staff did you require to deliver the program? What was the average length that young people participated?
So average length was about 8 months. That's that's taking in, you know, a whole bunch of factors, but I did drill down to that to see, just out of curiosity, it was 8 months. Because when we did go out and market the program, it was pitched between a 6 to 9 month journey. So in terms of full-time staff, we did at the peak of our program, because we are winding up now. It's at the end of June. Our program will be finished. At our peak, we had 4 full-time staff, so myself included, as well as 3 project team members who all had, I don't want to say the word caseload, but you know, their own groups of young adults to work with and mentors. So yeah, that was at our peak. We had 4 full-time staff and 1 half a part-time employed running the admin reporting side of things.
Awesome. Just finally wondering if the toolkit, the program toolkit, is available for use by other social enterprises.
Not at this stage. So it's something that was developed in-house, and we are very much leaving the door open to hopefully continue running out mentoring to work in other regions. So no, at this stage, no, it's not available.
Okay. I think we're going to have to leave it there. I think we could probably go on for another half an hour, though, picking your brain, Paul, Lisette and Mariana. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everybody for turning up today to listen to our webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. We will be sharing the link to the video so you can watch it again, and we'll also be sharing the resources that were exchanged in the chat function. So at that point, I'll leave it there and wish you all a good afternoon and good evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.